Hey, Zach. Thank you, Karen. Happy to be here. Happy Sabbath. All right, awesome. Glad you guys can hear me. Perfect. Happy Sabbath to those joining now. I'm probably gonna wait a minute as I see more people joining, and then I will start. I'm excited to be here. I've been preparing a message that I think has been on my mind the past few weeks, and I've been studying the book of Job lately, and a book about Generation Z, and God showed me some things to connect. Well, hey everybody, I'm gonna get started. Thank you for joining me this evening for a short devotional. My friend Zach Payne, Pastor Zach, asked me to do a little talk today. We went to seminary together, and we're a part of the Haystack together for a bit when we tried to break Guinness World Record for the world's largest haystack gathering, and that was fun. And I don't know if you were there, but I was a part of that, and so Zach and I go way back. But thank you, Zach, for inviting me. But my name is Andy Lee. I'm a chaplain at Mountain View Academy in the South Bay area, which is in the San Francisco Bay Area, and the South Bay is around San Jose, which is where I reside. And I get the opportunity to work with teenagers, ages 14 to 18, usually around. That's where teenagers usually age range goes to. But Generation Z, this current generation is Gen Z, and anyone born from the year 2001 to 2018 qualifies as Gen Z. And this is a generation born with the smartphone, born post 9/11, and parents whose top concerns are mental health issues, right? Addiction to smartphones and alcohol and drug abuse, right? More than ever, kids are supervised while doing anything these days. And although these issues aren't necessarily new to us, the level of exposure of these issues is happening at a younger age, and that's what's concerning. Now, I'm a millennial, like some of you may be watching, and but I didn't really start noticing the differences between millennials and Generation Z till I started digging deeper by reading a book about this generation. And a great one that I recommend, and I'll be sharing some thoughts from, is Generation Z Unfiltered by Tim Elmore. Okay, for those of you who deal with youth, that's a great book to help you understand the generation worker. It's written from a Christian perspective, and so it's really good. Elizabeth, in the book, Elizabeth Segrin, from a Fast Company journalist, describes the difference between the two generations this way. Millennials were pioneers. They invented Facebook, shopped from their smartphones, and smoothly transitioned from satellite TV to Hulu and Netflix. Generation Z, meanwhile, doesn't remember life without these basics of the 21st century life. Millennials came of age during a time of economic growth and were shocked to find a diminished, unwelcoming job market after college. Generation Z has been shaped by the recession and is prepared to fight and hard to create a stable future for themselves, end quote. Now, before I continue, I just wanted to say a quick word of prayer. I forgot to do that, and so let's just bow our heads real quick before I continue. Father in heaven, as I share this word with anyone that's watching in Milwaukee or around the country, Lord, I just pray that you bless somebody and that your spirit be present, and that it may go through the screens of our phones or computers, and may it touch our hearts, and may you just be here now. May your words be mine. In Jesus' name, amen. So in this current generation of young people, they seek security and want to create stability, because most of their life they've been living in reaction to the events of the world around them, shaping how they view society. But what does it look like for a child to grow today into a healthy, responsible individual, right? Some of you are parents and you have children. I don't, but here I am studying about this because I deal with teenagers, right? And I want to see them, grow healthily into the next stage of life. And, what does that look like today when the American Psych Association states something like this? The average child today experiences the same level of anxiety as a psychiatric patient did in the 1950s. Shocking. The level of anxiety that teenagers or kids these days experience is so high. Now, today, people, young or old, feel entitled to a plethora of desires. People speak of addictions as if it is normal now. It's like a normal part of life. For example, people say such things as, I'm addicted to my phone, I'm addicted to Netflix, selfies, pornography, vaping, and the list goes on. With the endless choice of entertainment options, our attention is being fought for by the media all the time, through Amazon, through Hulu, through Disney Plus, Apple TV, you name it, you got it. Further, our attention spans are decreasing as a result of how little attention that we are used to giving to various tasks. Posts, comments, memes, text messaging, Snapchats. As a result, diagnosis for anxiety and ADHD and depression, to name a few, has skyrocketed up. Now hear this out. Check out this statistic. In 2016, a report from the Center of Collegiate Mental Health said from their research, 139 colleges in the school year 2015 to 16, half of all students had visited a counselor for mental health concerns. Half of all students in the 139 colleges visited a mental health center. And think about that, okay? That shocked me when I first read that. Like, again, over 3 million teens reported in 2015 had at least one major depressive episode. And a third of adolescents and adults, according to the National Institute of Mental Health, have anxiety. We live in a society where insecurity and fear is so high, right? And not, for people in and out of the church, because we are in society and we see all the scary things happening, and anxiety and fear goes up for everyone these days. So how do we navigate, right? Now we're talking beyond, right, teenagers, but we are all, like, one of the realizations I had is that teenagers these days are experiencing things that adults are experiencing, right? Like some of these mental issues and whatnot at a younger age. So how do we navigate through all this chaos and become more in control of our thoughts and emotions? So Dr. Julian Rotter in the 1950s developed a sense of control called the internal external locus of control scale. Look it up. It's super interesting research. And those who possess an external locus of control do not believe that they are in control of their future. Rather, external circumstances or people determine their lives. On the other hand, people who have an internal locus of control truly think and believe that success and the outcome of their life is determined by them. Okay, so we have external control and internal control, and external is somebody who believes that the external circumstances of life is what determines their outcome, while the person who has internal control is more reliant on what they take more ownership of what happens in their life. And so in the Bible we see many examples of these two things, right? And so of both external and internal locus of control. I'm going to mention several examples, and this is where I want your participation a little bit, if that's okay. And you don't have to if you want to, but I wanted to take a moment to do a little bit of this. But I'm going to just list a couple examples, and I'll pause for a second after each one for you to guess in the comments whether it's internal control or external control. I've done this with my students before, so let's try it out. Eve choosing to eat from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. External or internal control? What do you guys think? I'm not seeing any comments, but if you're guessing on your own there, but not typing it out, that's fine. Okay, I see one person saying internal. Okay, external. It's external. It's actually external. Eve was influenced by the serpent to pull from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now let me give you another one. Daniel and his friends choosing not to eat the king's food that was served to him in Babylon. Oh, sorry, I didn't see that. I didn't know about the delay. I should wait. Thanks for participating. So for Daniel, that one is internal. Daniel chose to stay true to his beliefs and his convictions about dieting, and did not let the external circumstances, what everyone else was doing, to influence him. Let's do a couple more. Here we go. Lot's wife looking back at Sodom and Gomorrah and turning into a pillar of salt. External or internal control? What do you guys think? Very good, very good. Yes, most of you got this one right. Is external, right? The Lot's wife, whether she thought or heard of the fire coming down from heaven, destroying Sodom and Gomorrah, that led her to turn around, right? Okay, let's do a couple more. I'm not gonna do so many, but I want you guys to understand this before I continue. Moses trusting in God that he would part the Red Sea. Internal or external control? So Moses trusting God that he would part the Red Sea is internal control. And yeah, I'm gonna do a couple more, and I think do you guys still want to keep guessing, or should I just kind of like go through the next couple I have? So I'm gonna keep going here. I may rush through a little bit through some of these other examples, but let's see. When Judas betrayed Jesus for 30 silver coins. All right, I'll keep waiting and letting you guys guess. So Judas betraying Jesus, external or internal control? So I'm seeing a little bit of mix, but I believe that Judas's decision to betray Jesus and to kill himself at the end of the day was an external thing. That the events that were happening, the crucifixion and all that, pretty much led him to a place that wasn't good. And so external, right? And you can challenge me on that. That's okay. When Abraham chose to follow God's command to sacrifice his son on the mountain, internal or external control? Good. Most of you got it right. Abraham is internal, right? Abraham trusted God that no matter, in spite of how everyone else was sacrificing their children and maybe, never saw them again or whatnot, Abraham trusted God, right? He had this faith and trust in God that, when God told him to do something, he didn't rely on what happened, right? Like, what maybe happened, but just trusted God. All right, two more, and then I'm gonna continue on here. Paul persecuting Christians because of their faith for Jesus. This is not Paul, but before Saul. So Saul persecuting Christians because they believed in Jesus. Internal or external control? This one is a little tough, Pastor Sheldon, but I think I agree with you in that this one is external. Like, because I think Paul doubted, like he doubted Jesus and continued to go with his convictions and his beliefs because, in spite of what was actually, maybe in spite of what was actually happening and whatnot. But I think that was a little bit more confusing because Paul was truly convicted of what he was doing, following his internal. But at the same time, it could be argued that he is more influenced by external control, letting the beliefs of the Christians influence him to fuel his fire to want to persecute them even more, right? So it could be argued both ways in that sense. I'm going to do one more, and then I'm going to continue here. Job not turning his back on God after he lost everything. Okay, so I'm so glad everyone got this one right, and I think people, whether you're just repeating what Pastor Sheldon is doing, or no, I'm just kidding. Everyone got this one right, but Job is one. Job internal, right? Job was when he lost everything, his wife was telling him to curse God, and, his friends weren't being that supportive of him during that time, but he still stayed true to his belief in God, right? Now I wanna dwell and stay on the topic of Job for the rest of my devotional. And so Job is one of the oldest stories in the Bible. Actually, according to biblical scholars, it's the oldest book in the scriptures. So most of us may already have heard this story, so I'll summarize it briefly rather than go into detail. And plus, Zach said to keep this between 15-20 minutes, so I'm not going to take an hour here. But Job was a prosperous man who lived during the patriarchal age, which meant that your wealth was seen by how big your family was, meaning the bigger the family and the more animals you possessed, the more blessed you must have been. Now, while Job was at the peak of his success, the Bible describes a scene in the heavenly cosmos between the Lord and Satan. In summary, to God, Job was an upright and blameless man who feared God, according to Job 1:1. But to Satan, the only reason why Job was so righteous in God's eyes was because of how many possessions he had on earth. So Satan's argument was that Job was a good and blameless man because of how much he possessed. Now, you may be asking questions already, such as, are you saying that Satan has access to God's throne in heaven? And does Satan have permission to do whatever he wants to humans? And the short answer, without going too much into depth, yes. This is one of the truths we learn, is that Satan does have access to heaven, right? And look at the grace and the freedom that God even shows Satan after he is cast out. We don't see, Satan, we see Satan in this biblical narrative all the way until Revelation 20:10, where he's cast into the lake of fire, right? But Satan, to answer the second question briefly, is that Satan is only able to touch God's people with God's permission. And when he does give it, he ends up using the outcome for his glory. To make a long story short, God allowed Satan to touch Job and remove all of his possessions and even his entire family, okay? Put yourself in his shoes for a minute. He was left with nothing except his diseased body. But Job had a couple of friends that came a long way to try to comfort the guy, which they did a terrible job of. His three friends, at first, did the right thing, right? They sat and mourned with him for 7 days. Then they started opening their mouth to justify Job's entire situation, which is where they made the big mistake. If your friends are going through suffering right now and they're sick, or whether it's from the virus or any kind of illness, sometimes saying nothing goes a longer way than trying to justify the situation, to rationalize whatever they're going through, and so. They said things like Job must be suffering because he had sinned, which wasn't true, or that God was making him suffer to shape him into a better man. While partially true, but still not something nice to say when someone is suffering, right? But the real reason is found in Ephesians 6:12, and if you want to turn there with me, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, we can read that. I'm going to read that verse here. Ephesians 6, verse 12 says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the world forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces of wickedness in the heavenly places." So, in the Bible, we read about this, that there is a struggle in the universe where there are spiritual forces of darkness in heavenly places. We don't get to see this. There is a cosmic struggle in heaven that Job was completely not aware about, right? That he could not see at the time. And the question that was being tested in the heavenly realms was this. And I want you to catch this question. It's the question that we need to ask ourselves in our walk with the Lord, is God worthy of man's worship, void of materialistic belongings in this world? Let me ask that one more time. Is God worthy of man's worship, void of materialistic belongings in this world? So, we know how the story ends. Job laments about the day he was born, wishes he was never born, and eventually God shows up in a whirlwind and responds to him personally about his accusations about God being unjust and incapable of running the universe. Then God begins to question Job and ask if he was there when he created and designed the world, and gives him a virtual tour of how every little part of nature functions. Now, what was the purpose of God doing that? To explain, so God wanted to explain to Job that he had his eye on every little detail of the world, and that Job and his three friends are seeing the bigger picture from a very limited and narrow perspective. When suffering occurs in our life and we don't know the answers to our questions, oftentimes we are looking from a very limited perspective, right? It's hard to not focus on what you're going through currently when you are suffering. God goes on to ask Job if he would like to run the world for one day. Imagine that. God asking a human being to be God for a day. Now, what that would mean, if according to what Job and his three friends were saying, is that if they were to run the world with their way of thinking, is that a world where every evil, injustice of every person in every moment was met with strict punishment. But when we hear this, even we can understand that this kind of retribution is a bit more complex than that, right? There's something off about, like, if we just, punished every single wrongdoing in the moment, every time, what kind of world would we live in, right? It doesn't quite seem to work that way, right? God finishes by describing two amazing creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan, which were familiar creatures in the ancient Near Eastern mythology used elsewhere in the Bible. And for instance, Isaiah 27 and Psalm 74. And God is actually proud of these creatures that he created. He's actually proud that he made these amazing creatures, which weren't the safest, right? They were actually very dangerous creatures. But it's to teach Job this lesson that while the world that God created is good, it is not always perfect. And it can be beautiful, but yet dangerous at the same time. The world can be ordered, yet wild, right? And we see the animal kingdom kind of being evidence of this. We don't live in a world where suffering is not possible, yet we feel entitled for an explanation whenever we feel like we're in a rut. Like Job, Job wanted to know answers. Why am I going through this? Because it came out of nowhere. It is not a sin, as we read Job, to want an explanation for our circumstances. It's human. It's human to want an explanation. So take comfort in knowing that when you have a desire to know answers to your circumstances, it's very human, but it's not sin. Because Job did that for chapters and chapters, seeking an answer. But I think what we can derive from this story, more importantly, is this, and I want you to catch this, is that God is asking us to trust him in times of suffering and uncertainty, because there is a lot that we don't see. Okay, I'll say that again. God is asking us to trust him in times of suffering and uncertainty, because there is a lot that we just do not see. To close, I'd like to propose that in times of suffering and uncertainty, during times of crisis, like the one we're in right now globally, the antidote is gratitude. All right. See, Job lost everything, and suddenly, right? And he didn't get answers right away. Kind of like this COVID-19 virus is doing to a lot of people. Within days and weeks, life is literally stripped from their possession. For many who aren't struck by the virus are also losing jobs and homes without knowing all the answers. Among all of this, I think it is important to be grateful for what we already have. Don't you think? Dr. Robert Emmons from UC Davis discovered that those who consciously seek to view life as a gift experience multiple advantages. I quote, "Gratitude improves emotional and physical health and can strengthen relationships and communities. Without gratitude, life can be lonely, depressing, and impoverished. It elevates, energizes, inspires, and transforms. People are moved, open, and humbled through expressions of gratitude, end quote. In life, and I want to leave you with this, we are most likely not going to experience all the rights and privileges and friendships we want. And realistically, we are bound to experience some pain and hurt in this life. But perhaps in order to be happy in this life, it's not about putting our trust in things, but in a person. And that person being Jesus Christ, our personal Lord and Savior. I don't know about you, but I would rather live through life with the attitude that it is a privilege to be grateful for the things that I have and life itself, rather than think that everything that I have accumulated over time is deserved because of my own efforts, when all things are from God. So I hope that blesses you today. I again want to thank Pastor Zach for inviting me and for all of your participation. That was actually fun, more fun than I anticipated. But I am, I'll be praying for the Milwaukee conference here, the greater Milwaukee area, and so happy to be a part of your ministry today. Blessings. Have a happy rest of the Sabbath. Oh, actually, it's East Coast there. You guys are on Central Time. I'm in California, so it's still a little sunny out here. So, but have a good rest of the weekend then. But yeah, take care. God bless.